In case we have never met, I'm Michael Price, and I want to help you succeed in growing your business.
Welcome, I'm Nancy, your co-host.
And I'm Michael Price, your host.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a subject that is honestly a little bit heavy, both metaphorically and, well, literally.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We're looking at the human body, specifically the veteran's body, as a kind of living record of service, and we're doing this because, based on the stack of research and sources we have today, there is a massive disconnect happening.
A huge one.
It's this disconnect between what a veteran knows to be true about their own aches and pains, the reality they live with every single morning when they try to get out of bed, and what the Department of Veterans Affairs sees on a piece of paper.
It's the classic translation error, but with incredibly high stakes. When you have veterans walking around with the spine of a 70-year-old inside a 35-year-old body.
Wow.
They know something is wrong, their family knows something is wrong, but they're being told there's no evidence of an injury because they didn't go to the doctor while they were in a combat zone.
Which, when you say it out loud, it just sounds absurd. Excuse me, Sergeant, can we pause the firefight? I need to go see the medic about my lumbar strain.
Exactly. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't. And that missing piece of paperwork, that single sick call slip, creates a gap that can ruin lives.
Right, and that's where we are going to start. The hook here, the phrase that really jumped out at me from the source material specifically regarding airborne operations, is this concept of the controlled crash. I think most civilians, myself included, have this movie-style image of paratrooping. You float down, maybe the sun is setting, you tuck and roll, and it looks, well, graceful. But the sources are telling a very different, much more violent story.
Graceful is probably the last word any paratrooper would use. If you talk to anyone who has earned their wings, they'll tell you the truth. One of the sources explicitly states every static line jump is a controlled crash.
A controlled crash.
And I want to sit with that for a second because it frames everything we're going to discuss. We aren't talking about skydiving for fun on the weekend with a steerable rectangular parachute and a nice soft grass landing area.
You mean the guys with the Red Bull helmets doing flips?
Right, that is a sport, a different universe. What we are talking about is static line operations. You are essentially cargo. You exit the aircraft, and from that moment until you hit the dirt, your body is subjected to physics that are designed to be survivable, not comfortable.
Survivable, not comfortable. That's a key distinction.
It's everything, and the argument we are going to unpack today is that this crash isn't an accident, it's the mechanism of injury. It is the cost of doing business.
And the problem, the core conflict we are addressing in this deep dive, is what the sources call the civilian-rater disconnect. The research, including some really insightful commentary from a Dr. Marshall Bahr, points out that the person rating your disability claim, the actual human being sitting in a cubicle somewhere reading your file, likely has zero frame of reference for what that crash feels like.
Exactly, and we need to be fair to the rater here. They aren't malicious. They just don't know. They see a job code.
Right.
They see 11 Bravo or airborne qualified on a DD-214. That is just text on a screen to them. It's abstract. They don't have the visceral memory of the opening shock snapping your neck back.
Yeah.
They don't know what 100 pounds feels like on your knees when you hit the ground at 18 feet per second.
I think of it like trying to describe a migraine to someone who has never had a headache. You say, "My head hurts," and they hand you an aspirin and tell you to get back to work.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
But you need to explain the visual aura, the nausea, the light sensitivity, the whole picture.
That is it exactly. The writer sees back pain, they think, well, my back hurts too when I sit in this chair too long. And they don't understand that. For the veteran, back pain means crushed discs and nerve damage from years of impact. So the gap we have to bridge today is between, I was in the infantry and I carried a machine gun and 80 pounds of gear for 12 months straight over mountains.
Those are two very, very different sentences to a rater.
World apart.
So our mission for this deep dive is clear. We aren't just listing injuries, we are talking about translation. We're going to unpack the mechanics of spinal destruction, the whiplash of the canopy, the invisible blast injuries, and then, and this is the actionable part, we are going to detail exactly how to prove it using things like jump logs and buddy statements.
We have to. We're turning the physical reality into evidence because if you don't paint that picture, nobody else will paint it for you. And if you don't paint the picture, the claim gets denied. It's really that simple.
Let's get right into it then. The anatomy of this controlled crash. I want to start with airborne operations because the sources are so specific about the damage here. When we think of jumping, we usually think of the landing. That's the scary part, right? Hitting the ground.
That's what everyone focuses on.
But the notes highlight something that happens way, way before that.
The landing is brutal, and we will absolutely get to that, but you're right, the trauma starts the second you leave the door. It's the canopy shock. Or the opening shock.
Break that down for us. What is physically happening to the body at that moment? Because in my head, the chute opens and you slow down.
Okay, let's visualize this. You are standing in the door of a C-130 or C-17. The wind is deafening. You are wearing a helmet, the Kevlar pot. That weighs about 3 to 4 pounds.
Okay.
Maybe you have night vision goggles attached to the front. That's another pound or two, but it's leveraged right off your forehead, which makes it feel much heavier.
So you have a bowling ball attached to your head, essentially.
Basically, now you have a heavy rucksack, maybe a weapon case strapped to your side. Total weight, you and your gear, maybe 300 pounds. You exit the aircraft, you are entering the slipstream of a jet engine moving at 130 to 150 knots.
So it's not a gentle step out.
No, you're being thrown into a hurricane. You're accelerating toward the earth, you're falling. Then the static line, which is literally a yellow rope hooked to the plane, pulls the parachute from the pack tray.
And this isn't a slow, graceful unfurling.
No, it's an explosion of nylon. It catches air, it snaps open, and the sources describe this moment as a violent deceleration. The canopy catches, but your body, that 300-pound mass of muscle and gear, wants to keep falling.
Newton's first law, an object in motion stays in motion.
Until acted upon by an unbalanced force. And that force is the parachute harness. It grabs you by the thighs and the shoulders, and it yanks you to a stop. But here's the critical part, the part that causes so much damage.
Yeah.
Your head doesn't have a harness. Your body stops. Your head, with that bowling ball helmet, keeps going. It whips forward and down, chin to or back with massive force.
Like the worst whiplash you can possibly imagine in a car crash?
The source material calls it a neck whiplash mechanism, and that's exactly what it is. Your head snaps back or forward violently, and this happens on every single jump. It's not a malfunction, it's not a mistake, it is how the system works.
Wait, say that again? It's supposed to happen?
If the chute works perfectly, you get whiplash. That's the trade-off. So before you even think about the ground, your cervical spine, the neck bone, C4, C5, C6, has just sustained a massive trauma event.
That's terrifying to think about as a repeated event. You do that in jump school 5 times just to qualify.
5 times in a couple of weeks.
Right.
But then you get to your unit and you do it again and again for years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cumulative nature of it. It's the dose that makes the poison.
So you're not going to feel a snap neck immediately?
No. Probably not. You might just feel stiff the next day, a little sore, but you are creating micro-traumas in the discs and the ligaments of the cervical spine. You are stretching the ligaments that hold your vertebrae in place. It's like getting rear-ended in a car crash at 40 miles an hour. But vertically and doing it every other month.
And over time, that has to lead to something serious.
That's why the sources link this specifically to chronic neck issues later in life, degenerative disc disease in the neck, chronic pain, stenosis.
So when a veteran is 45 and has constant neck pain and tingling in their fingers, that's not from sleeping wrong.
No, that tingling is called radiculopathy.
It
means the discs in your neck have been compressed and whiplashed so many times they are bulging out and pinching the nerves that run down your arm.
And that started in the air 20 years ago.
It started the first time the canopy snapped open.
Okay, so you've survived the opening shock, your neck is throbbing, but you're checking your canopy, you're drifting down. Now comes the earth, the parachute landing fall, or PLF. I've seen diagrams of this in the research. It looks technical, almost like a martial arts move.
It is. The PLF is designed to distribute the impact. The theory is sound.
What's the theory?
Ideally, you hit with the balls of your feet, then the side of your calf, then your thigh, your hip, and finally the lat muscle on your back.
Yeah.
You roll to dissipate the energy across the meaty parts of the body so you don't break a bone.
Ideally. I hear a big butt coming.
Right? Ideally is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. In reality, you are coming down fast. Depending on the wind, you might be moving sideways or backwards. You might be landing on a slope or in trees or on rocky ground, and you are carrying combat equipment. The sources mention loads of 60, 80, even 100-plus pounds attached to you.
Which means you aren't just a 180-pound person hitting the ground. You are a 300-pound projectile.
Correct, and physics dictates that energy has to go somewhere. The formula is kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. You increase the mass with that rucksack, you massively increase the energy at impact. The first point of contact is the feet. The ankles and the knees take that initial shock wave.
And unlike a car, You don't have crumple zones.
Your meniscus is the crumple zone. That's the cartilage in the knee. It acts as a shock absorber. When you overload it with that much weight and speed, you are mashing that shock absorber down.
Like taking a hammer to it.
It's like taking a hammer to a rubber washer. Do it once, fine. Do it 50 times, 100 times. The washer starts to fray and tear and crumble.
And the sources are very clear here. This leads to what they call classic airborne diseases.
Yes. Knee arthritis, osteoarthritis, and ankle impact injuries. We see this all the time. A veteran has bone-on-bone knees at age 40 that is the result of the cartilage being ground away by repeated impact landings. The shock absorbers are just gone.
And it's not just the legs, right? I have to imagine that shockwave doesn't stop at the knees. It has to travel up the body.
It goes straight up the chain. This is where we get into the spinal toll. The sources are incredibly detailed about this. They talk about spinal compression. Imagine your spine as a stack of blocks, the vertebrae. In between each block is a little jelly donut, the intervertebral disc. That disc is there to provide cushioning.
Okay, I'm with you. Blocks and donuts.
When you hit the ground with 100 pounds of gear, gravity is pulling the gear down and the ground is pushing your body up. The spine is caught in the middle. It compresses.
The jelly donuts get squished.
They get squished hard. And if you squish a jelly donut hard enough,
the jelly squirts out.
The jelly squirts out. That's a herniated disc. Or the donut just gets flatter and flatter over time and loses its bounce. That's degenerative disc disease, or DDD. The sources list these specific conditions: DDD, lumbar strain, and herniated discs.
And here's the scary statistic from the notes that really got me. Veterans often have multiple herniated discs by their mid-30s.
Mid-30s, that is accelerated aging. It is staggering.
It really is.
A normal 35-year-old civilian might have some back stiffness if they help a friend move a couch over the weekend. An airborne veteran at 35 has the spinal imaging, the MRI, of a geriatric patient. Their spine looks like it belongs to a 70-year-old because they have subjected it to these high-impact compression events over and over and over again. It's not natural wear and tear, it's trauma.
This brings up a really important point about the mule reality, as some of the sources call it. We've talked about the jump, which is a high-drama moment, but a lot of the sources point to what happens after the jump, or even if you never jumped at all. The daily grind of the infantry, or the combat engineers, the rucksack.
This is section 2 of our breakdown, the grind, and frankly this causes just as much, if not more, damage than the jumps. The sources describe a rucksack injury profile. We need to dispel the myth that soldiers just carry a backpack with a change of socks and a water bottle.
Yeah, I think people see hikers on the Appalachian Trail with these high-tech lightweight packs that weigh, 30 pounds, and they think it's the same thing.
It is the absolute opposite of that. We are talking about carrying your house on your back, plus ammo, plus batteries, which are incredibly heavy, plus water, which is 8 pounds a gallon, plus body armor, which is another 20 to 30 pounds just on your torso before you even put the ruck on.
The sources cite weights of 60, 80, 100-plus pounds consistently.
And you aren't carrying this for a 20-minute walk to the bus stop on a paved sidewalk. You are patrolling for hours, days, sometimes weeks. You are traversing mountains in Afghanistan, climbing over walls in Iraq, diving into ditches.
What does that constant weight do to the body physically? Is it just the muscle strain? I mean, don't you get stronger?
You do get stronger to a point, but it's structural. Think about the leverage. When you put 80 pounds on your back, it pulls you backward. To not fall over, you have to lean forward and you have to hunch. That puts your spine in a compromised, curved position. Then you walk. Every single step sends a jolt through that curved spine.
So you're grinding the vertebrae together at an angle they're not designed for.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It compresses the spine continuously. It pulls on the traps and the neck muscles, leading to chronic upper back pain. But it also destroys the feet. The sources specifically mention plantar fasciitis.
That's that sharp pain in the heel, right? I've heard people complain about that. It sounds awful.
It feels like stepping on a nail with every step. The plantar fascia is the connective tissue on the bottom of your foot that supports the arch. It acts like a spring or a rubber band. When you add 100 pounds to your body weight and walk 10 miles on uneven ground, you're overstretching that spring. You are tearing it on a microscopic level.
And eventually it just gives out.
Eventually the arch collapses. It becomes pes planus, flat feet, which then causes a chain reaction of problems in your ankles, your knees, and your hips. because your foundation is gone. That's a direct result of the load.
So we have this clear cause and effect. Jump equals compression. Ruck equals strain. It seems so obvious. So why is there such a problem proving this to the VA? Why aren't these medical files 3 inches thick with complaints? Why doesn't every veteran have a folder full of "my back hurts" slips?
This is the crux of the problem, and the sources call it out explicitly. Military culture. You have to understand the mindset. In a combat unit or even a high-speed training unit going to sick call, the doctor was viewed as weakness, plain and simple.
Or a sick call ranger if you go. I've heard that term.
Exactly. You're a malingerer. You're a broke dick. You're letting the team down. If you go to the doctor, you aren't training. If you aren't training, someone else has to carry your weight. Literally, they have to pick up your slack, your ammo, your gear.
So there's immense peer pressure to stay quiet.
Immense. And it's not just from your peers, it's from leadership. If your back hurt, you didn't go to the doctor. You took 800 milligrams of Motrin, we called it vitamin M. You drank water, you changed your socks, and you drove on. Suck it up. Wasn't just a saying, it was the operational standard. It was the job requirement.
So you could have a serious injury brewing?
You could have microfractures, torn ligaments, and herniated discs, and you would never, ever step foot in the clinic because the mission came first, always.
Which leads to the disastrous scenario 20 years later. The veteran files a claim for a bad back, and the VA looks at the record and says, "There's nothing here. You served for 4 years and never complained about back pain once."
Right. No complaints in service means it didn't happen in service. That's the bureaucratic logic. It's binary, it's black and white. But the reality is it did happen, it just went undocumented. That brings us to Section 3, the evidence stack. If we don't have the medical notes, what do we have? How do we prove the crash happened if there's no police report?
The sources mention something I really like. They call it the dosimeter of impact. They're talking about jump logs.
This is a crucial piece of strategy. If you are an airborne veteran, you likely have or can get your jump log. This is a record of every jump you performed. Date, drop zone, aircraft, equipment. The VA might see it as just administrative data, a list of dates.
But it's more than that.
So much more. You need to present it as a dosimeter.
A dosimeter measures radiation exposure, right? Like a nuclear plant. The more radiation, the higher the number.
Exactly. If the dosimeter goes up, you know the damage is done on a cellular level, even if you can't see it yet. Your jump log measures trauma exposure. The argument you make is this. Reviewing medical literature, one static line jump causes spinal compression and a whiplash event. Here is proof from my official military record that I did this 45 times.
Ah, I see. It changes the conversation completely. Instead of saying, "I jumped a lot," you say, "Here is a log proving my body absorbed a 4G impact 52 times.
It quantifies the trauma. It makes it objective. Even 5 jumps in jump school cause damage, but a career of dozens, or for some guys hundreds, that creates undeniable cumulative trauma. The log proves the dose of trauma.
But what about the guys who lost their logs? I mean, it happens. Moves, fires, just lost paperwork over 20 years. Or maybe they weren't airborne, but they did air assault school.
Then you look at the DD-214, your discharge papers, and your qualifications, your badges. Being air assault qualified or ranger qualified isn't just a point of pride. For a VA claim, it is legal proof of an injury mechanism.
How so?
Air assault involves rappelling and fast roping.
Fast roping is sliding down a thick rope from a helicopter, right? Like in Black Hawk Down.
Yes, often with heavy gear on. Think about the mechanics of that. You are gripping a rope for dear life, controlling your descent with your hands and feet, sliding down 40, 60, 90 feet. It destroys shoulders. It's incredibly hard on the grip and the rotator cuff. And the landing from a fast rope isn't always gentle either. You hit the ground running.
So the badge itself is evidence of exposure.
If you have the air assault badge on your DD-214, you have proof that you were exposed to those specific hazards. You use the badge to prove the exposure.
I love that. Use the awards as evidence of the physical cost. It's not just, "I was cool," it's, "I was hurt." Now, I want to shift gears to something that is less visible, but equally, if not more, devastating. We've talked about bones and ligaments. Let's talk about the brain. Section 4, the invisible trauma.
Blast exposure and TBI, traumatic brain injury. This is a huge area where the civilian radar disconnect is massive. Most people, including raiders, think TBI means you got knocked unconscious or you have a visible head wound.
Or that you have a Purple Heart. If you don't have the metal, you don't have the injury. That's the assumption.
Right, the no Purple Heart scenario. And the sources are absolutely emphatic about this. Mild TBI and concussions are rampant in the military, even without a Purple Heart. You don't need shrapnel in your head to have a brain injury. You just need to be near the pressure.
Explain the physics of that, the overpressure wave, because I think people hear blast and they think of the fire, the heat, but the wave is the real killer.
It is. When an explosion happens, whether it's an IED, a mortar, or even your own weapon firing, it creates a shock wave of high pressure that moves faster than the speed of sound. This isn't wind, it's a solid wall of air. When this wave hits you, it passes through your skull.
It goes through the bone.
It goes right through. And your brain is soft tissue. It's like jello floating in cerebral spinal fluid. When the wave hits, the brain compresses. Then as the wave passes, there is a vacuum under pressure and the brain expands rapidly. It literally bubbles, a process called cavitation.
Oh my God.
It causes the brain tissue to stretch and shear on a microscopic level. It tears the axons, the wiring of the brain, and you feel nothing at first. Maybe your ears ring, maybe you feel a bit dazed, but the damage is done.
And this happens even if you are behind a wall or in a vehicle?
It can, yes. Physics is tricky. The wave can wrap around corners. This is especially relevant for combat engineers, the 12 Bravos. Their entire job is to blow things up. They use breaching charges to blow doors open. They might be standing behind a blast blanket or around a corner thinking they are safe.
But they're not.
But that overpressure wave still hits them. They are getting hit with microconcussions every single time they breach a door.
So it's cumulative again. It's not one big bomb that gets you a Purple Heart. It's 1,000 little booms that slowly break you down.
Exactly. And let's look at the tankers, the 19 kilos. They fire the main gun of a tank, the 120 millimeter smoothbore cannon. The overpressure from that gun is enormous. If you are standing in the hatch or even inside the turret, you are subjected to that pressure wave and the violent recoil.
I can't even imagine what that feels like.
A career tanker might fire hundreds of main gun rounds. That is hundreds of concussive events to the brain.
And none of that would ever show up on a sick call slip. You don't go to the medic and say, hey, the main gun gave me a headache.
You'd be laughed out of the motor pool, take a knee, drink water. That's the response. So you have these veterans retiring with memory loss, irritability, sleep apnea, migraines, all the classic TBI symptoms, but no medical record of a head injury. They just think they're getting grumpy or forgetful.
They think it's just part of getting older.
They don't realize their brain has been physically altered by the pressure waves they endured for years.
It's tragic because the injury is real, but the paper trail is completely non-existent. So how do we fix this? That leads us to Section 5, bridging the gap. We have the strategy. The sources call it painting the picture.
This is the most critical, actionable advice we can give today. If you are listening and you are nodding your head, pay attention to this part. When you file a claim, you write a statement in support of claim. Most veterans make a fatal mistake here.
What's the mistake?
They write one sentence. They write, I was infantry and now my back hurts.
Which assumes the rater knows what infantry means in a practical sense.
And they don't. They assume infantry means you marched in a parade. You have to write a detailed narrative. You have to explain it like you are talking to a toddler or a Martian who has never seen an army. You do not say, I was infantry.
Okay, let's workshop this. What do you say? Give me the good version.
You say, I was an 11 Bravo infantryman from 2004 to 2008. My daily duties in Iraq involved foot patrols of 10 to 15 kilometers, carrying approximately 100 pounds of gear, including my body armor, rifle, ammunition, water, and radios. I carried the M2 machine gun, which weighs 17 pounds, plus 600 rounds of ammunition. I slept on the ground or on the floor. I kicked indoors. I was exposed to mortar fire on these specific dates at this specific forward operating base.
You're making them visualize the grind. You're putting them in the boots. You're giving them concrete details.
Yes. You mentioned the specific weapons. I fired the AT-4 rocket. I was within 50 meters of mortar impacts. You have to create the in-service event with your words because the medical record is silent. You're testifying to your own life. Don't be humble. This is not the time for it.
And what if the rater thinks you're exaggerating? Oh, everyone says they carried 100 pounds. That's where the buddy statements come in. The sources call this the gold standard of evidence.
Buddy statements, technically called lay evidence, are incredibly powerful. If you don't have a medical record, you have a buddy. You find someone you served with, your team leader, your squad mate, anyone.
What should they write? I imagine, yeah, Sergeant Smith is a good guy. His back hurts. Isn't going to cut it.
No, absolutely not. He's a good guy, helps nobody. That, a character reference. We need evidence. The statement needs to do two things. The buddy needs to verify the conditions and corroborate the injury.
Okay, break that down. Function 1, verification of condition.
The buddy writes, I served with Sergeant Smith in Ramadi in 2006. We were both 19-kilo tankers in the same platoon. I can confirm that we jumped off the hull of the M1 Abrams tank, which is a 5-foot drop onto hard ground at least 10 times a day in full gear to do maintenance or pull security.
Okay, so they are corroborating a controlled crash environment. They are proving the hazard existed for everyone, not just the claimant.
Exactly. And function 2 is corroboration of unreported injury. This is the magic bullet. The buddy writes, I remember in July 2006, after a jump off the tank, Sergeant Smith was limping badly. He couldn't bend over to tie his boots. I told him he should go to sick call, but our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Jones, said we had a mission in 2 hours and no one was going to sick call. Smith took Motrin and kept going. I saw him in pain every day for the rest of the deployment.
Wow, that fills the evidentiary gap. It explains why there is no record.
It proves the injury happened in service and explains the lack of documentation. It validates the suck-it-up culture argument we talked about. It transforms hearsay into witness testimony. It tells the VA, just because you don't see a doctor's note doesn't mean the injury didn't happen. I saw it.
That is huge. It empowers the veteran to build their own case file from scratch. And then the final bridge is the Nexus letter. Just briefly, because it's a medical term, what is that?
A Nexus letter is from a doctor, usually a private doctor, not the VA. They review all the evidence, your statement, your buddy letters, your service records, and your current x-rays or MRIs, and they write a professional medical opinion that connects the dots.
So they draw the line from A to B.
They draw the line. They state it is at least as likely as not that the veteran's current degenerative disc disease is caused by the repetitive spinal compression of the 67 parachute jumps described in his service records. That's the nexus.
So the veteran paints the picture of the event, the buddy verifies it happened, and the doctor explains the medical link. That's the winning trifecta.
That's how you win. That is how you translate the crash into a rating.
I want to touch on Section 6 before we wrap up because there are some specific resources mentioned that seem incredibly helpful. The FAST letter, this sounds like a cheat sheet.
It essentially is the 2010 FAST letter is a VA document. Officially, it's the Duty MOS noise exposure listing. It's about hearing loss and tinnitus, that ringing in the ears. It lists almost every military occupational specialty, or MOS, and rates them for noise exposure, high, moderate, or low.
So if your job is on the list, you're good.
If your job is on the list as high or moderate, the VA is supposed to concede exposure. You don't have to prove that your job was loud. The government has already admitted it. If you were an 11 Bravo, a 19 Kilo, a combat engineer artillery, you were on that list. But, and this is key, you have to mention it.
You can't just hope they check the list for you.
Never hope, never assume. In your statement, you write, per the 2010 FAST letter, my MOS of 13F, Fire Support Specialist, is listed as having a high probability of hazardous noise exposure. You have to remind them of their own rules, use their bureaucracy against them.
I like it. We also have some specifics for tankers and mechanics that we skimmed over but are worth highlighting. Tankers specifically, it's not just the gun, it's the toxic soup.
Yeah, the sources mention the environment inside the tank. It's a closed box. You have diesel fumes, hydraulic fluid, the propellant from the rounds, cleaning solvents. It's a chemical bath. And for mechanics, it's the same. They're working with JP8, degreasers, all sorts of solvents. This leads to issues beyond just bones, respiratory issues, skin conditions.
And for the tankers, the jumping off the hull is a big one for knees.
Oh, huge. It's that 5-foot drop onto concrete or dirt hundreds of times a year. That's a PLF without a parachute.
And the Navy, we can't forget the fleet. The sources mention asbestos.
Older ships especially, it was used in insulation, pipe lagging everywhere, but also the steel decks, just walking on steel all day, every day, has zero shock absorption. It destroys knees and backs just as much as a rucksack, just over a longer timeline. And sleeping in racks, those tiny bunks, often forces the spine into unnatural positions for months at a time on deployment.
It seems like no matter the job, the body pays the toll. There's no escaping it.
That's the theme, the cumulative cost. Whether it's the sudden crash of the jump or the slow grind of the steel deck, the body is keeping the score.
So let's bring this home, the outro. We've covered a lot of ground. If you are listening to this and you are that veteran sitting there with a bad back, bad knees, and ringing ears, but a blank medical file, what is the summary strategy?
Let's boil it down to 4 steps. 1, understand the mechanism, know why you hurt. It wasn't bad luck, it was the canopy opening shock, the PLF, the rucksack weight, the blast pressure. Name the enemy.
Okay, step 2.
2, gather the hard proof. Get your jump logs, get your DD-214 with the badges, treat them like gold. These are your receipts for the damage. 3, fill the gaps. Write that detailed personal statement, paint the picture, do not be humble, explain the pain. Get your buddies to write those letters confirming the conditions and the unreported injuries.
And the last one?
4, connect the dots, get a Nexus letter if you need one to have a doctor make the medical connection official.
It's about building a case that is impossible to ignore. I want to go back to that analogy you used earlier, or rather the sources used, the body as a rental car.
It's a perfect, albeit dark, analogy. When you join the military, you are leasing your body to the government. You sign the contract and they drive it hard.
They don't just drive it to the grocery store?
No, they take it off-road, they crash it, they overload the suspension with heavy rucks, and they run it on bad fuel, MREs, and adrenaline. They redline the engine for years.
And when the lease is up?
When you turn it back in, when you discharge, the suspension is shot, the frame is bent, and the engine is knocking. It's not the same vehicle.
And the VA claim is just the bill for the damages?
Exactly. You aren't asking for a handout. You aren't asking for charity. You are saying you broke the rental car. Here's the bill for the repairs. The wear and tear wasn't an accident. It was the cost of the mission. The government accepted that cost when they sent you. Now they need to acknowledge it.
That is a powerful way to frame it. It removes the stigma completely. It's just accounting for the damage done.
And here's the final thought I want to leave with the listeners, something to really mull over. We talk about age. Normal 35-year-olds do not have the spine of a 70-year-old. If you are 35 or 45 and you can't pick up your kids because your back gives out, that is not just getting older. That is the injury. Your pain is the evidence.
The body is the record.
The body is the record. Don't let a lack of paperwork convince you that your reality isn't real. The paperwork is just a hurdle. The pain is the truth.
The pain is the truth. I think that's a perfect place to leave it. We hope this deep dive helps you translate that truth into something the system can understand. Thanks for listening to the deep dive.
Take care.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.
If you found this video helpful, please consider donating to helpallvets.org. Thank you.